choose to send Libya nuke material and Iran, and I still think we'll find out that the Con network also helped Saddam and North Korea. In return, also North Korea helped Pakistanis with missiles. That's a rogue gallery of not just Frankenstein, but a group of folks that have caused nothing but pain. And if you include Libya in it, you include Iraq in it, and Iran, and North Korea, Pakistan kind of iffy, but it's certainly a problem, and I think a lot of people worry about the stability of that government. I don't think China did this by accident, and if they did, are they having second thoughts? And the question is saving face more important than actually saying this is really a bad problem? Because I always get a sense of what is that we go to the Chinese and we think, oh, just have to put a little leverage on the North Koreans, and they don't. They don't put leverage on it because they subsidize the regime 80–90% of their food, their fuel oil, trade, business, and everything, the banking systems. And then we were told the other day, I remember someone saying, well, yeah, there are a lot of organized crime elements in China and business people that do business with North Korea, but the Chinese Politburo and the people don't know, and this included helping the North Koreans with their ballistic missiles, which I think the Politburo knows what's going on.
Would you
Anyway.
please comment?
Sorry for the length of that, but it's
Briefly.
Well, I'd like to take questions from the audience because we've just got 10 minutes left. You know, I'm not an expert on nuclear proliferation, but I haven't read actually this book. I should do. I think you're right. Up to a point, the Chinese were serial proliferators of ballistic missile technology, and we now know with the Con network with the fissile material as well. But in the late 90s, I think they had a bit of an epiphany on this and came to realize that their previous behavior was going to come back and bite them, and indeed they were getting caught. You know, remember the M11 missiles in the crates in Karachi that we photographed and found, and then we stopped one of their ships in the high seas thinking that they were carrying missiles. Turns out the so-called Milky Way was not, but nonetheless, I mean, they were getting caught. A. B, they were realizing that some of these regimes they hadn't been supported were exactly stable or even China-friendly regimes, and they were under enormous pressure to join the NPT and the MTCR. And it was at a period of time when the Chinese were trying to join other international institutions. This was their period of wanting to be seen to be at least a kind of good contributor to global governance, a good member of the international club. So they joined a lot of regimes in succession in the late 90s. NPT was one of them. They never did join the MTCR, in fact, because a little bit of American hypocrisy here. We've been calling for China to come into the MTCR repeatedly, and then, lo and behold, when joining the MTCR is like joining a golf club, apparently. You have to have one of the members sponsor you. So Germany said, fine, we'll sponsor China. We get it. We want China in under this roof so we can kind of monitor them. Then it turns out the appendices to the MTCR involve classified information, sources and methods, information the United States government didn't want to share with China. So that was a little bit of egg on face with respect to the US, because we've been trying to bring them into this regime. And the good news of that story is they never have joined the regime, and they don't have access to the classified appendices, but they have been adherents to the MTCR ever since. Those missile transfers to Pakistan stopped. North Korea stopped. So, I actually think, I agree with you, Peter, but I think there's a timing issue here. In the whole ballistic missile nuclear proliferation category, over the last 15 years, I would stand to be corrected, but they haven't been caught, at least, in this, and they've been adherents to both of those regimes. But the damage had been done. The damage to Pakistan and the linkage you just noted to the North Korean regime is too late. So yeah, they do have they are what's the word? Be culprits, culpable. They are indeed culpable on the North Korean program.
Dennis, do you have one quick comment?
Yeah, I was wondering, Professor, you were talking about the traditional Chinese view of the world as Sino-centric and the emperor and the peripheral states giving due homage. North Korea is infamous for having insulted the Chinese in many ways. I mean, example, when Xi Jinping went to Seoul a few years ago, it was reported the North Koreans were doing target practice on pandas instead of US soldiers. Another example, Chung Sung-tek, who was a great friend of China, maybe he was even filling in, telling them what was going on, but one of the charges that was brought against him when he was tried and executed was engaging in selling off natural resources to foreign entities. It was pretty clear they meant China. So Kim Jong-un, I mean, even his father and grandfather had resentments of China, but he's been so overtly insulting. How did the Chinese deal with that?
Yeah, exactly. The North Koreans have kicked the Chinese in the teeth repeatedly. They are not acting like a docile tributary state at all. And they are playing off, at least traditionally, the Russians and the Chinese, going all the way back to the Sino-Soviets, well, even in the Korean War, playing the two off very well. So they got to get with, they didn't get the memo on, you know, how to be a good docile tributary. And the Chinese are very exasperated with them. And one thing I should have added and will now is that there's a considerable community of Chinese strategic thinkers, intellectuals, foreign policy experts who are arguing for dumping the regime and trying to figure out a path to a soft landing, i.e. managed collapse, or, you know, regime change. They won't use that word, but they're now speaking out, a number of these people, and speaking privately. So one, you know, I said the North Korea issue is going to be in the top of the pile of international relations papers for the next president. Within that paper now should be some discussion with the Chinese about managing regime change, not just the nuke piece of the puzzle, and not just contingencies for collapse. Now, the U.S. has been trying to talk to the Chinese about contingencies for the collapse for a long time, and the Chinese absolutely refused to have that conversation, to their detriment. You know, it's ridiculous. But I'm suggesting we got to do more than talk about the military consequences of collapse. That's the way the Pentagon, where the American government has pitched it to China so far. Our two militaries have got to be in on the same page and in discussions with each other when this thing comes down. So what I'm suggesting is a little bit beyond that. We can start having a conversation, because there's a number of people in the Chinese Communist Party. I've even had a conversation with one in the military, a number of intellectuals I know who say, look, it's far past time that our government, China, ditches this regime and brings an end to this, because they're jeopardizing China's own security in a number of ways. THAAD being one manifestation of that in their thinking. So,
Thank you. Just one quick
Jay,
question.
One Korea Foundation. Just one question, very hypothetical, somewhat unfair question. I'm very impressed with your depth and breadth of knowledge about China. So I think you, perhaps more than anyone I know, can answer this question. Given this increasing existential threat the United States face, it can no longer just allow it. And it does everything it can to persuade China to come along, and China refuses, doesn't take part in it. And America somehow decides, hypothetically, is the only way the preemptive strike. Suppose that happens. What will China do? Now, given some of the historical background, Korea was, as you pointed out, one of the most docile tributary states. And if Korea and MacArthur didn't threat the army Manchuria, perhaps they would, Mao Zedong perhaps would stay on the other side. Now, at least hypothetically at the time, United Korea, strongly aligned with the United States, was a possibility to China at the time. And given the growing trade and others with South Korea, which will continue into United Korea, wouldn't they one day somehow accept it?
Thank you.
well, I've always been of the view, I mean, there's a kind of consensus in our field that a divided Korea benefits China. I don't disagree with that, it does, and I try to explain why I agree with that part of the view, but there are many people in the field who believe that China wants a permanently divided Korea. No, I've never really bought into that. I don't think so. I think they would like a unified Korea under their tutelage, right? The way the tribute system worked. That's what I was trying. That's the way they think about the peninsula. So, you know, they're open to various modalities to get to there. Whether regime change is one of those modalities is a new element. They were trying to push, you know, the North to open. They're trying to move from integration to unification. They've been down several paths of discussions with the Koreans and with us, North and South. But they're exasperated. So your first part of your question, what would they do if there was a surgical strike against North Korea's nuclear facilities? I don't know, but that should be part of the conversation that the next president has with them. That'll get their attention. And you know, it's not an impossibility they know that it's being considered, and everything else has been tried. Doesn't mean a nuclear weapon has to strike a nuclear weapon. You can take out those systems with conventional warheads, right? With a radius of yield that's pretty concentrated now. I leave it to our friends in uniform who know more about this than I do. But a surgical strike against North Korea's nuclear capacities need not spill over into China, you know, I would think, what I know about them, you know. And if there have been conversations about how to deal with the situation after that, between the US and China, there may be, I don't know, just speculating, it's all very hypothetical. But we've got to have those kinds of adult conversations with the Chinese. You know, we can't allow them to just say, sorry, it's bufang bien, it's, you know, inconvenient to talk about such sensitive things.
We would certainly not go to war.
Okay.
No.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's give Professor Shambach a round of applause. Small talk from Philadelphia, has your name on it. And then we have our next on tennis of golf.
Great.
And that's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, that I cannot do. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I give you just 5 minutes break if anyone to take. 5-minute break. Our next speaker, the General. No challenge, only opportunity. That really impressed us. And he will say more about surgical strike. Almighty US Air Force. Okay, 5-minute break.
Is this still recording?
Yeah, it might be before.